Okay, hey everybody, welcome to this evening's stream. So the first thing I want to say just quickly is that I have been playing with the setup a little bit. I've kind of changed things around and there's been little changes here and there. So if there are any kind of audio issues, then do make sure you shout them out in chat so I can kind of pick those up quicker and sort that out. But I think everything should hopefully be okay. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to look at breaking down the stock packages. So what I mean by that is the things that come with the starter games that anyone can access through the community tab. So you've got things like inventory, health, prompts, the game package, spawning, all that sort of stuff. I'm going to basically go from an empty game and kind of build up a starter game by installing each package. We did do this actually while I was writing up the plan. I noticed I had actually done this last year, but I figured it's definitely worth revisiting, and I might do a little bit of a deeper dive into kind of how it all works and why it kind of just drags and drops and behaves and works the way it does. So I'm joined this evening by Ed. So Ed, do you want to say hello?
Hello.
Cool. Okay, that looks like all that audio seems okay. So yeah, so basically Ed's going to be here in the background, probably listening to me nattering away most evening. But Ed's going to basically build us an environment that our game is going to sit in, just so it's a bit more interesting than this blank canvas. So we did do a bit of a poll on Discord, and it seems like everyone wanted to see a magic forest. So I think Ed, that's your brief for the evening.
Right, sounds fun to me.
Cool. Okay, so what I'm just gonna I'll just let you crack on with that basically, and I guess we'll jump straight into it. So if anyone does have any questions at any point, do make sure you shout them out in chat. I'll do my best to sort of monitor that and answer them. So I'm hoping basically the objective here and what we're going to get out of this is to kind of open people's eyes a little bit into the structure of some of the starter games. Obviously they're really great places to begin with, and even now if I'm making a game, I'll still go from a starter game most of the time. But I think it'll be useful to kind of show people how they come together, like what the building blocks are, to almost kind of, I don't know, encourage perhaps going off the path a little bit, maybe changing some of the logic up or some of the parameters that you might not have noticed or seen that you could work with. I think that's basically the idea. There was something else that's kind of fresh, and this is for the people over on the Twitch side. We've set up some commands, so feel free to check those out. They're in the title. Give those a go. Let me know if they work. We've also got a couple of alerts that might pop up if people follow. So if you can encourage people to follow, that would be great. Okay, so assuming it's all working, there's no audio issues because no one said anything, so it's great. Okay, so as I say, we've got an empty game here. So basically what we start with, if I just go to the advanced mode, I'll have a look. But basically what we've got is the terrain voxel mesh and the start location, which is the locator we spawn at, and that's it. There's no scripts, there's nothing else attached. So this is essentially about as empty as you can really get without kind of basically having nothing in the void and dropping forever. So that's where we're going to start from. So we're going to step through, as I say, each kind of package as we go through. So if I go to the community tab, I'm going to look for what I'll do first. I'll have a look at the notification package first. So this is more of an example of how easy it is to really just to get these packages installed. So it's just simply search for notification. You can tell it's a stock package because it has this little Crayta logo next to the name, so you can just see that sort of just there where it says notifications. It says a Crayta package, and it's also got the small symbol next to it. And there's also an option at the top, which if you check this, it'll only show the official Crayta packages. And what we mean by that is the packages that that you'll be able to essentially that make up some of the starter games. Okay. So now we've got that, let's go back to our packages. Okay, so we see we've got our notifications installed, and again we've got that this is a Crayta built-in package icon to let us know. If I were to install this, then most of the time if it's got a user space notifications, so here we can see it's got that user notifications. If I then go to here and drag that across, that's simply going to install that onto the user. So we notice now if I just look up here, we've got our shout and our notifications that have appeared at the side. So these are kind of bits of UI that have come with this. We can see that we've got a notification widget, notification script. So this package has come with two things, a script and a widget. So this is basically what a package is. It contains assets that other people have created, whether that be a template, a widget, a script, a voxel mesh, almost anything that you can create in Crayta and that can be made into a kind of a library asset. So let's have a look here. So if I was to play the game now, we wouldn't see anything. There's nothing to kind of drive these notifications appearing. But now that these are here, there's various other parts of the stock packages that will always kind of ask the user or tell the user to display a shout, which is this middle prominent shout message or a notification. So installing this is always a good way to kind of get a lot of visual information out of the packages that we have. So let's go to the next one I was going to do. So quite a common thing you're going to want in a game is a health bar. Okay, so quite often having health helps you to establish, a player's health. A player can be killed, a player can be injured, can regenerate health. There's a lot of different things you can do around that, and obviously all of this is available to just be coded. But if you wanted to install that yourself, we just simply look for health, and again we get our health at the top, a Crayta package with the icon. So let's install this one. Okay, so the slight difference this time is when I go, we'll see that we have player space health that we've called it. That's kind of an indicator that this is actually something that exists on the user. Sorry, on the player, not the user. So we need to go to our player template. So one thing I will just mention actually while I'm on the subject is it can cause a little bit of confusion, and this is perhaps an area of kind of UX that we'd need to address. But when you install these packages, what you're essentially getting is a script folder as a template. So that means that you get a new template in your game. So if I go to the templates tab, we'll see that I've got my user as a template with that kind of user icon. I've also got user notifications with this sort of script folder icon. So these are two separate templates. If I was to click on user notifications, okay, it kind of looks like I'm in my user at this point. I've got my widgets have appeared here, but I'm actually editing the template of the user notifications, not my user itself. So what you need to be careful with is if you are wanting to actually affect the way the notifications would appear in the game, by changing any properties, actually what you'd need to do is go and really change it on where you installed it earlier. So when I went to my user and dragged it over, so this is where you'd be looking for. It's always what you've installed on your user or your player, not necessarily the template that came with the package. So it's just a little gotcha there to look out for. Let's go to the player. Okay, so I can see I've got similar to before with the user. I've got a sort of an empty player entity or template. And I guess just to quickly explain why the health goes here. All right, so basically users and players are kind of very different things. So a user is the kind of the physical person playing the game. So in this case, it's me. I am the user. The player is the avatar. It's the character that's in the world. So every player, every player must have a user attached to them. But every user doesn't necessarily have to have a player attached to them. So if you think of a user in your game who hasn't spawned yet, wouldn't have a player. They've just been killed and they've despawned, they wouldn't have a player, but they would still exist. Whereas a player, as long as a player is an entity physically kind of in your world, you're not ever going to be able to have a player that doesn't have a user, because they always have to sort of be bound to a user. So once you've got your player, you think, okay, well, health is actually something that relates to the character. It doesn't relate to the user. It doesn't really relate to the person that's playing the game. It's a player thing. It's a character thing. So let's drag that on here. So that's a useful thing to think about when you're thinking of UI as well. So specific pieces of UI that are only relevant to a player would need to go on the player. If you want a piece of, if you want a piece of UI that is persistent even once the player has been despawned, once the character has been destroyed, then that piece of UI would need to go on the user, because obviously the user is always persistent. For as long as someone is logged in your game, that user entity is always available. So yeah, hopefully that kind of clears things up. around the difference between a player and a user. And I've got my player health. You saw that I've literally dragged that in. And again, through most of this, we're probably not really going to touch any code. And that's the interesting thing here, is we're going to kind of set up a game from scratch, but not really, touching any code at all if possible. The difference this time is different to the notification script, is this one comes with a lot of script properties. These are things that have been exposed from the script. So designers, people coming in who want to kind of make games but not necessarily get into code, can use these sorts of these properties to really define the way the game works. So, for example, recovering health is something I quite like in shooters. It encourages people to to kind of think about what they're doing. They want to get in. They want to kind of get into advantage areas. They might take some damage, and then instead of just staying there, they're going to think, right, I need to back off and take cover. Little things like that. So having an option here to simply tick that to recover health. Okay, that'll expose a couple more options. So what's the rate of recovery, and how long does it take for that to happen? Because obviously you don't want someone to recover health straight away. So you can specify how many seconds is it before they actually then start to recover. So using properties is a really good way to really craft your own experience in your own gameplay options without having to touch any code. So I'm going to leave that ticked. I'm going to say we're going to recover health. Okay, and I'm just going to do a solo preview, just so I don't keep interrupting Ed while he's doing his building. Okay, and what we should see is once I load in is essentially I'll spawn in, I'll load in, I'll get a health bar, but I probably won't get any notifications yet because there's nothing driving that. So here we can see Ed's doing some nice terrain work. Okay, so in the bottom corner we've got my health bar. And then that's it. There's no logic running, there's no gameplay running here, but it's the start. I've got a character running around a world with health bar, so they're basically there ready to be injured if we want them to. So good. Okay, let's jump back.
Dragged me out.
Oh, is that put you into loading screen?
Yes, it did.
Oh, that was
It's fine.
odd.
Yeah, strange. I'm back in the game now.
Okay.
Weird.
Interesting. Want to bear in mind. Okay. So what we're going to do next? Let's have a look at setting up a weapon. So I guess I should have said at the start, we're going to basically set up a free for all here. So free for all is a pretty good, straightforward example. Kind of there's fairly straightforward rule sets. Obviously, you could do a lot more with packages, but I think for the purpose of this sort of demo tutorial, it kind of makes sense to keep it relatively straightforward. So we're going to do a basic free-for-all is the idea. So what we want to do is we want to get an inventory. We need to be able to hold weapons and hold items. Let's have a look at that package. Okay, cool. So what have we got this time? So if we go to our packages, so if we have a look at our inventory, so this has come with quite a little bit more, and actually we'll notice this time we've got two different script folders that we need to use. We've got our user inventory, but we've also got our player inventory view. So going back to that conversation before about how the user is kind of the persistent person and the player is the character. There's two different systems to the inventory package, which are what we kind of going to explain here. Just move this up here. Okay. So if I do the first part, so let's get the user set up. So think again. So the user is where the kind of the stuff that we want to be persistent is kept. So if I drag that over here, we'll see that this comes with a couple of script folders, actually, one nested under the other. The inventory that you attach to the user is sort of like the brains of the inventory. So here, this is the persistent stuff where it will load your inventory, it will save your inventory, it will handle the sort of what the person actually has in game. What weapons do they have? What potions? What items? What coins? What currency? And all that sort of stuff. So that's all kind of put into the the user, because that's stuff that we want to be able to retain once the player has been destroyed. We still want to know what the user's inventory is. If we go to our player now and install the player inventory view, we'll see that we get the UI. So again, thinking about it, this is the stuff that we want the player to be able to see when they're playing. We want to be able to see, their hotbar, what weapon they got equipped, what their current coins, currency gems count is, how much ammo they've got, whatever sort of things you'd want the inventory to show is going to be on the player. Once we despawn the player, the user doesn't really need to see that in a UI form. It just needs to remember it. So the two systems will sort of talk to each other, or the two scripts. So basically the user script will tell the player what it's got in its inventory, and it will kind of update it from there. Have a little quick look in this one. So we're not going to change any code, but I think it's always good to have a little look at how it all comes together. And as I mentioned, I kind of want to do a little bit of information about how this stuff almost works with like the drag and drop system. We're not having to change code. Things are listening, things are working properly. So the main way that works is through it can be through events. So you could have events ready to plug into. Update inventory view. So that's a function that is called from the user to basically say, so again, your user is in control of what's in the inventory. And if that says to update the inventory view on the player, then this is the function that gets called that will then handle all of that, i.e. which item is selected on the hotbar, what's the information, and then from here it will handle it itself, sending it to local, all that sort of stuff. So it's quite a complicated script, but again, it's worth bearing in mind what those two differences are there. Okay, so we've got our inventory. So at the minute, if I was to load in, we actually wouldn't be holding anything. We wouldn't have anything to use. So if I want to equip something, so in this case, let's say I want to get my gun. I want to have a weapon to use. So again, we'll go back to the community tab and search for gun. Okay, and let's install that. Okay, so let's have a quick look at what we got with that one. Okay, so we've got a template and we got various scripts and just things that we can add around the place. So let's go to the user, and I mentioned we had this second script folder that appeared. So that's the defaults. So this is where by default in the starter games you would specify what items a player starts with. So let's assume they haven't got a saved inventory, they're loading in for the first time, or it's not a game that saves an inventory. So a lot of these shooters won't necessarily save an inventory. There's no save logic in here. You'll essentially load into the game, and when the round starts, you'll be given what the default is. If I click on here, we've got a script called inventory default script. And here, there's two properties really. You specify the count, so how many of this item. So if you want them to start with, 4 grenades, 6 throwing knives, 10 potions, that would be the count. And then the item template is the template that you want them to get. In this case, it's going to be the gun. Okay, so that's a gun that we've just installed. We've not had to change anything with. And then in theory, so Ed, if you don't mind, maybe take us both to preview so we can have a little shoot of each other.
Sure, yep, that's cool.
Okay, so we can check to see. So we can see that we've got the inventory at the bottom. I've got a gun in my hand that fires, and Ed's just shooting me there, and we can see that my health's going down. So that's working pretty nicely, and then I'm killed. Right, so what we'll notice now, and we get our notification as well, so that's what we set up at the start. But what we'll notice now is that I'm not actually respawning. Okay, so I've been set to false. I've basically been set, am I alive is false, but the game continues, but I'm not actually respawning. So that's because there's some more parts of the stock packages we need to install there. So go back. Okay. So what's the next stock package we want to look for? This is the auto respawn script. Okay, so this is the script that handles a lot of the spawning for us, and it works really well with the game script around whether is the player going to be kind of, is it a lobby? Do they spawn here if it's a lobby? Are they on team 1 and they spawn here? If they're on team 2, then they spawn here. So it's kind of really quite a powerful package in terms of, you know, team-based stuff as well as, you know, lobbies and round-based stuff. Slater says, what would I do if I changed something in a package script and wanted it back to how it was originally? So if you were to make a change to one of the scripts, so let's just do this quickly. So if I was to open up the notification script, and let's just say I added a test comment, okay, and saved. So what we'll see is if I go to this scripts, the scripts library. So obviously all of the scripts that are in this game are from packages. I haven't actually made any, and you can tell because they've got this little package icon at the end, and if you hover over it, it'll tell you which package it's come from. So I can see here that notification script is now changed, and that's actually got a little man with a pencil. Okay, and that's telling me that this has been modified. So it did come from a package, and if I hover over it, it's telling me it came from the notifications package. But because it's got that little icon, it means it's been changed from the original. If I wanted to, you know, if I'd made a mistake, or if I kind of thought actually I could write my own script and leave this package alone, all you need to do is right click that and you get this revert option. Okay, so if I click revert, this will just warn me and it will say this will revert the notification script back to its original state from the package it came from, which is notifications. If I hit OK, okay, that should do it. We'll see that because I had the script open still, it's now gone to be unsaved with this test comment still here. So let's just close that and don't save it. Okay, so that's still saying it was as it was from the package, and we'll notice that my my test comment has disappeared. Okay, so it's a simple case of just right click in the library and revert if you've got the little pencil icon. Okay, so let's get some spawning. So the spawning again happens on the user, so the user will spawn players. Let's have a look at our packages, and this time we just got a one script folder and the one script. Okay, so this comes with a few different properties. Most of these you won't need to adjust. We'll see that we've got things like the spawn sound you can set, whether there's respawns, whether respawning is active. You might actually have a different script somewhere that's handling how players respawn, and it just uses this script to actually handle the spawn. You know, the flexibility is there for people to really do these sort of things however they'd like to. The amount of respawn delay time, so this is quite a key one actually for a lot of people who have made games from starter games and haven't necessarily ever tweaked this. So if you go to your user, the spawn folder, you'll see the respawn delay time property. So let's say you've got a game where, you know, it's a kind of a difficult time trial or a difficult obby. You don't always really want to have a slow respawn time because it's kind of frustrating. You know, you want players to respawn quicker, you know, so they can just throw themselves at the difficult challenges faster. So it's always worth thinking about, you know, that sort of time. By default, it comes as 5 seconds, which is quite a long time. So maybe, you know, if it's that sort of game, maybe lowering that to 2 or 3 seconds would be fine. It can make a big difference. It doesn't sound like much, but I think that sort of thing can really make a big difference when it comes to game design. Depending on if that's the sort of thing you'd want. Obviously a shooter, you might want it to be a little bit longer because it's kind of a punishment almost for, you know, give players, the team that are getting more kills get an advantage if more of the opposition are dead for longer sort of thing. But when it's an obby, when it's you against yourself essentially, you kind of don't want to be waiting for ages every time you die. So it's just something to bear in mind. A few other options here. So spawn on login. So as we can see from the tooltip, this will set this to true. It will spawn the player straight away when they log in. Otherwise, they don't spawn. So basically, with that unchecked, the user will the script will assume that something else is going to handle the player spawning. So i.e. the start of a round, the start of a lobby, or generally you might not want them to get a player at all. You know, you might want them to not get a player at all until a certain thing happens. So by unchecking that, it means that you don't by default get a player avatar character at the start of the game. So the only thing you really need to tweak here, I'm not even sure you'd need to, but I think it's always good to specify the player template, especially if you've got more than one player template in your game. and you maybe want to control which one players actually spawn as. Let's change this to player. So it's just simply my player template, and we'll leave the rest for now. We say they're there to be played with. So on user died is an event. So when the user is killed, what's going to happen? You can bind in some logic there. So that should be all set up ready for us to basically kind of have respawning, but we probably want something to handle kind of the game logic for us. So let's have a look at that now. Okay, so again, I'm just going to go back to the community tab and search for game. And we can see here there's a few other packages that would be pretty handy for sort of game creation. So we've got the capture the flag package, which is the stock package that comes with the things like the flags and the logic. There'd be more stuff to hook up and plug in. And again, you could just use the starter game. But as an example, these things are kind of little components, or even the targets for making a target practice game. That sort of stuff's there as well. Okay, so let's have a look. So the game comes with quite a lot of things. Firstly, it comes with a game controller, so a locator with the game attached to it. So let's have a look at setting that up. All we need to do is drag that across to our terrain. Okay, and we see we get this game one. I'm just going to rename that to game controller. And that comes with a game script. Drag this right out. Okay, so the game script is a really powerful script. It's quite daunting perhaps at first, especially if you dive in and look at some of the Lua code inside. It's quite a complex script. If there's anyone here who is a Lua programmer who's starting to get to grips with how kind of games in Crayta come together, I really recommend almost picking this one to pieces, filling it with print statements and really getting your head around and understanding how the round system works, how it all comes together. I think that would be, it's a really good exercise and a really good way to learn about the different nuances of Lua and how kind of tables can be passed back and forth and events can be called and all that sort of stuff. Obviously, if you don't want to do any code, that's fine. There's a lot of properties here that you can start to play with. So things like always do a lobby. So simply a checkbox to say whether after each round, is it going to do the lobby phase again? Or if once you hit the results, if you've still got enough players for a new round, will it just kick you straight back into a new round? The timing, so how long the lobby is, how long the game is. It's worth noting here, so it actually says it on the tooltip, but if you set the max play time to 0, then essentially it won't have a time-based round. So it might be that your round is based on something different. So we did this recently with our crop hunt game, where there wasn't a round timer because it didn't really make sense to have a timer when there was two teams competing for an objective. So the hunter was trying to eliminate all the survivors, and the survivors were trying to find all of the alien eggs. So no timer, but one of those teams would eventually complete their goal. So it made sense to kind of remove the timer. So the only thing you need to do there is to just set the time to 0, 0, 0. And then in the script, it picks that up and says, okay, they clearly don't want a timer. So that's fine. Min players to play. So that's the minimum amount of players needed to start a round. So let's say you're making a free-for-all shooter like we are. Ideally, we want more than one player, because if one player starts the round, it's going to basically be a bit boring because there's no one for them to fight against. So if I set that to 2, then now that means that I'm going to have my it's going to wait basically in the lobby or pre-lobby for 2 players before it will start. Okay, so we've got more things here. So we can do things like the score you get for killing, whether the game has teams. So actually in this case, we're going to uncheck that because we don't have teams. And you'll notice that hides a bunch of other properties because, again, we don't really need to see the things that aren't relevant. So this game won't have teams. It's just every man for himself. Auto respawn. So we want the game to basically handle respawning, and that's going to talk to the spawn script that we attached to the user before and basically say, okay, well, the users just died, so let's respawn them. Always respawn for play. So this is kind of one of those little interesting ones that doesn't really make a huge difference. It depends on the style of game, but essentially players can and often are alive in the lobby stage, and they're running around the level and they're doing stuff in the level. But do you want to make the players respawn at the start of a round, or are you using the lobby as a chance for players to scatter and separate? So depending on what your intention is with where players can get to in the map, or if you need them to be at the start positions at the beginning of the round, not the lobby, then that's obviously one to check or uncheck. Allow mid-game join. Now this is a pretty good one, pretty interesting one to think about, and I think this would catch a lot of people out. Is imagine you've got like a battle royale game or a survival game or something where players are competing against each other through the duration of a round for some sort of survival or objective. If you allow players to join mid-round, it kind of defeats the purpose, perhaps, because then the hunter might be getting towards the end. They might, have one player left to find, one player left to get. They get into the last sort of 30 seconds of the game, and then if 3 or 4 players join, ideally they shouldn't join that round because it kind of breaks that round. For the hunter, it makes it a little bit more impossible. So you might want to uncheck that. It's just one of those things to really bear in mind when it comes to kind of planning out game logic and what you want to do. A few more things. So results camera. So this is the camera that it cuts to. So once we get to the results, the game will handle essentially despawning, destroying all of the players. And it needs to put the user somewhere, ideally. So it will put them to this camera that's specified. And then we've got a load of events down here. So these are the events that we can hook into to basically get logic powered. And what we'll do is we'll kind of maybe play a couple of iterations and we'll work out what here needs to be plugged in. So the other thing that came with the game package was not just this, but it also, as you'll notice, it came with a load of scripts and widgets and various things. And these are all of the user-based game things to look for. So let's go to our user over here. Okay, and again, we see we've got our user game script folder. So if I drag that in here, now this is going to come with quite a few things. This has come with the user game script folder itself, but also 6 other script folders that handles things like the heads-up display, the HUD. So at the minute, I'll just make this a bit smaller. We see that we've got the timer at the top, which can be used in various ways. It kind of uses it mainly for the play timer. Got the lobby, so all the kind of the widgets and things around the lobby, and the timer at the top, and how many players are currently in the lobby and who's in the lobby. The results, so we've got a results screen, including kind of leaderboard logic. So a few things there, and again, all this just kind of comes with that user game script folder. Cool. So this handles the loading and saving of the player's highest score on the game. And then you've got a couple of checkboxes here for whether it has a leaderboard. Does it have a cumulative score? So does it kind of keep counting up? If you score 5 points across 3 rounds, you get 15 points. Each time you score another 5 points to add up. There's a few options there. Interesting gameplay things that you can do with that. A spectate script. So whether we spectate other players, it might be that you want a player to not spectate other players. But we'll leave that checked from here. Delay on spectate death is a pretty good one. So obviously you want to make sure that the player kind of knows they've been killed, but you don't want it to necessarily wait for ages either. So a couple of seconds makes sense, I think, by default, but that is there as an option to be tweaked. And then finally, the team script. So this is a very simple little script that essentially controls what team a user is assigned to. So is it team 1 or team 2 or 3, 4, 5, 6, or however you kind of want to configure your game. By default, a lot of these things do just handle kind of one-on-one teams, but without much code, without much kind of tweaking of what's currently there, you could really start to explore having various kind of you could have a 3v3 basically you could have 6 teams essentially. Seven Days got a question: how to make the tycoon team based? So saying, I'd assume you'd need to assign multiple players to a tycoon area. How you do that is beyond my knowledge. Yeah, so I think that would really depend on what the tycoon game is. I can't really imagine how a team based tycoon game would work unless it was round based and not kind of classic tycoon. It might be that say 2 teams of 3 competing against each other to I don't know, to like, I don't know, build a factory first sort of thing, but it would be like a round based thing that it would reset each time. Maybe something like that. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure how a tycoon would work to team based, but I think ultimately that would run on a different system. It's worth saying as well, this game script is kind of what powers a lot of the round based games. So things like the capture the flag, survival, team elimination, gun game, those things, they use this game script. Things like the obby, the time trial, the tycoon, adventure, they don't use this game script because they doesn't really make sense because they're not round based games. So maybe we'll do another this kind of stream where we break those down in a bit more detail another time. I think this was always the one that is kind of the more popular kind of style of game, and definitely the one that requires more explanation, which is why we've started here. Okay, so there are all the various things, and we'll notice that if I go back to my user game, pull this out, so we see this has come with a bunch of properties and events already configured. There's just a couple of things here that we need to set up because the spawn logic just comes separately. We want to make sure that we have a user spawn for us. So if I just drag my user spawn script folder down here, okay, and then I want to set this up to say that on round start we want to spawn players. Okay, so all I'm going to do is say spawn, and you'll notice that the actual function itself takes parameters. And it's that parameters table that comes from the game script that determines, is this the lobby, all these various things that this user spawn script kind of just knows by default how to handle. Okay, at the end of a round, we want to make sure we despawn the players. Despawn. And I think it's always good to just be safe here. We'll just, on the start of results, we'll also make a call to despawn the players just in case it the on round end didn't handle that properly. I think it just makes sense to catch that at the start, so we know that by the time we get to results we've definitely dropped our players. Okay, so that should give us a game loop, and we should be spawning and respawning. So let's just double check the code of the spawn user script. Okay, so a little bit complicated, and there's lots of stuff here that you can kind of ignore. But we can see here that we have our on player died. Okay, so on player died will get called, or it should get called, and if not, we'll have a look to see where that comes from. But I believe that's going to come from the health script. And essentially, because we've got respawn active ticked, this is where it's going to handle the respawning of our player. Okay, let's just have a quick look at the health script. So we can see that when a player is killed, so when we call kill on a player, where is it? Maybe it's not here actually. We'll see. Well, actually, it'd be interesting to see if we, if we did a preview, we'd see if this works, and if not, we'll have to sort of bind that respawn logic up. But the code is now there. Obviously, before when I was killed, there was literally no chance of me respawning because the code wasn't there. So it's there now. Ed, are you free to have a quick go? This is looking really cool, by the way.
Oh, cool.
It's one of those things, I always say this, but it's really nice to kind of be in templates and scripts and stuff, and then to come back and see like a world suddenly being built.
Yeah, sorry I'm being so quiet, everybody. I'm just having fun.
No,
throwing stuff in there, and yeah, enjoying
it. Cool. Right, let's have a quick preview then. Let's have a look, see how we're getting on. So we'll notice that we've not actually respawned here. So I've kind of in this sort of player or this user camera that I can move around, but there's no player for me to actually move. But the game starts, and now I do have a player. Okay, and if I go Ed, what's going to happen to Ed? Probably nothing. Oh, and you respawned. Cool. Okay, so that's there. So, so just by adding those logic, and again, not really changing any code at all, we've got to the point where we've got essentially a shooter. We've got some logic going there. We could start to add things like the scoreboard apps and start to add some more things. But yeah, cool. Looking good.
I'm probably using a lot more lights than is generally good practice, to be honest, but I'm just making it look cool.
That's fine.
It's a very small map, so
that's the job of an artist, right? Is to just
clean it up after.
Yeah, make it look nice. Care about performance later. Yeah, no, it looks really nice. I like the Chinese lantern things going on. That's cool. Right. Yep, Slate is saying the lights in the tree look really cool.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, put little windows in. The magical forest idea was sort of entwined with kind of fairy stuff, so you'll notice I've got the fairy rings of mushrooms that we can maybe leave pickups in, something like that. That's kind of my idea.
Oh yeah.
Like pickups could be in there. I can do some magical lights in the ponds of water, and then yeah, just the doors and windows and the trees, just to give a bit of atmosphere.
Yeah, it looks nice. Yeah, I like the windows on it. Look pretty cool.
Unfortunately, I can't dig into the tree itself, so you can see the tree through the window. I'd like to have a little indent, but I can't have everything.
I mean, you could do maybe like you could do a neon voxel mesh.
That's a good idea, yeah. Yeah.
Because it'd probably fit quite nice. It would look like a glow coming through like a gap.
I've made all these trees templates as well, so if I make
very good.
If I fix one of the trees like that, then all the other trees will change to match.
Nice.
Since we're talking about packages and templates and things.
Cool. Right. Okay, well, so now we've got a little bit of logic there. That's starting to come together quite nicely. So while I'm thinking about it, you mentioned about pickups. So let's have a look at another pretty straightforward one we've got, but it's the health pickup. This doesn't actually come through as a official stock package, but it is one that works pretty well, and it works with the health package pretty nicely. So this is an example of a package conflict. So one thing to bear in mind when working with packages is you've got a good chance that certain packages will obviously bring in other like sort of dependencies. So this package needs to have XYZ package to work properly. And in this case, this health pickup needs the inventory package because it uses that to kind of work with kind of interfacing with the player and the character. But what's happened here is this package actually references an old version of the inventory package. So it's saying this requires version 34, or at least when this was created, the inventory package it was kind of bound to was the 34th version of the inventory package. But 48 is what's installed. That gives you a choice here. Do you want to install 34, assuming that the 34th version of the inventory package is the one, will specifically have the code we need? Or do we keep version 48, which is the version that's installed that came that I installed earlier? I think more often than not, you can assume that the latest version is the better version. The problem here is if I click install 34, then that perhaps might work well with the health pickup, but it could break the way that the guns work or the saving works or anything like that. So I think, what we need to look at is, it's kind of one to bear in mind. It could always be worth firing up an empty game and just having a little play around with it before you do it in your main game, just to kind of keep it a bit safer, just, see exactly what it is you need. So I'm going to keep version 48. And again, saying the same with the gun package. This is probably because they're all using a script. I think imagine it's the pickup spawner script. I'm going to keep the latest version of the gun package and also the crosshair package. Okay, once that's installed, let's have a little look at what that came with. Okay, so it's just a health pack pickup. Okay, so that comes with a few little things. And we'll see that basically, so this pickup spawner script is a sort of a stock script. So it comes with the gun, it comes with various things, and it's a good way to create pickups and collectibles in your game, especially when it's a round-based game and you want the game to essentially handle, putting all the pickups back at the start of a round. Should this be a pickup that respawns? Should it work when you run into it? Do you have to interact with it? Should it spin? Should it respawn? What is it you pick up? There's a lot of options again here that are really worth bearing in mind. So the pickup sound, so we can set that. So I'll do it on the template actually. delete this. Edit. Okay, so any changes I want to do, I want to do it on the template to make sure it reflects across all of the pickups that I've placed. We'll just do a generic pickup sound. Okay, so I've got that sort of pickup sound is going to happen. Do I want to use it on collision? Yeah, probably. You want players to be able to run into this, especially in like a gun game. This sort of pickup's a really good thing to not have to require players to look at and physically pick up with the interact, because it's kind of frustrating gameplay. You'd expect them to be able to like sort of strafe into it while they're in a gunfight to heal. But again, entirely up to you. The rotate time, so how long does it take to rotate? It's amazing how much rotation on an item sells it as a pickup. Quite often in games, you'll see things in the map and you kind of and ahhing about whether you can and can't actually collect it. It does sort of break realism sometimes, but often you don't really mind so much. It's quite just nice to know that if a thing is rotating, even if on a timeline it's doing a bit of a bounce as well, it's kind of clear that okay, that thing is a thing I can pick up. So that's always worth bearing in mind. Does it respawn? So this is quite a powerful thing to think about especially in sort of shooters. Health packs respawning kind of makes sense, but then perhaps you might have like a super weapon on the map that will respawn like at the beginning of a round it will reappear, but once someone's collected it, do you want it to respawn, or is that kind of the player's reward for finding it, is they get the super weapon? So again, just simple checkbox that you can do there, no code required. If you uncheck that, I assumed they would disappear, obviously not. Okay, so there's a few other options here. So the one thing that's worth noting here that makes this a little bit different to the way that some of the other pickups work. So things like a gun, you would pick up the gun and it would give you the weapon to add to your inventory. The health pickup doesn't really add to your inventory. It just it's just a thing that you interact with and you get the sort of the benefit of. So the way that's achieved is by using the onPickup event, and we notice we've got this second script attached to it, which is the health pickup script. So this can determine how much you heal by with the slider. So 1,000 would be the sort of the stock default full health. So the health script gives players 1,000 health. We'll leave that at say 500. Okay, so what this is doing is using the onPickup. So when a player picks it up, this is what's called, and it's actually going to call it on itself. Going to call the health pickup script and this on use function. Okay, so that's just something to bear in mind if you're making your own pickups and collectibles, that it doesn't have to be something that you kind of obtain into your inventory. It could be a buff like a speed boost or something. And for it to work, you would essentially add the pickup spawner script, which will handle kind of how often it appears and all that sort of stuff, and then bind into the onPickup event to say, okay, well this thing, should boost the player. So here's the script I've written that does that, which should be a fairly straightforward little script. Yeah, so that fairly straightforward stuff. So what I can do, Ed mentioned placing some of these in the mushroom rings. So let's do just that. Was the mushroom fairy circle is a template? Look at you. Okay. Stop. So we should see that's now appeared in each of these fairy circles. Has now got one of these health packs appeared.
Hey.
Can we create a package that modifies other package, sort of like a patch package? I don't think so. I can't think of a way that you'd be able to do that. Because ultimately, once a player has installed a script, they would then install your patch script, but then it can't do things like adjust the way that the code works, or they would still have to kind of set that script up that package up in game. So I don't think that would work. I'm not sure of how that would work, but it's an interesting thought for sure. Yeah, these windows look really cool now with the voxel behind.
And it was good as well because I could remove the lights that I was using, because the neon has its own natural glow. So all those lights that I was worried about are now all gone.
Well,
Just
there we
handled
go.
by the voxels.
optimized. Yeah, and it really works as well as like a little kind of window into some sort of magical place. Yeah, cool. Right, okay, so what was next? So I'm just kind of thinking now, what do we have? So we got the player crosshair, but we never actually set that up. So a big part of the shooter games comes with the sort of the way that the guns can auto aim. I say auto aim, kind of have the aim assist, and the nicer crosshairs rather than just the default crosshair. So to set that up, that came with our gun script. We want to do that on our player. So we see we've got the player crosshair. Okay, so let's just drag that over. We get a little bit of UI. It's not the easiest to see. Some damage indicators in the middle and a sort of ammo bar down here. There's a few little options to play with, so how long the hit's displayed for and various things like that. So the guns actually are the things that interface with this. So if I go to my gun template, okay, I'm just gonna forward settings out. There we go. Okay, so there's my gun template. This came with a script which was called the Iron Sight item script. Okay, and this is the script that is the one that basically interfaces with that crosshair. And so if the player is holding an item and it has this Iron Sight item script attached to it, which this gun does, and the crosshair script on the player, can pull out the information it needs in order to render the correct things. So in this case, how big is the crosshair? What's the type of crosshair? So different crosshairs can depict sort of behaviors of weapons. So obviously like a cross, which is like the classic sort of crosshair, will be like more of like an accurate weapon, like a rifle or a pistol or something. The dot, the kind of the small dot, I imagine, classically is depicted as like a lower caliber weapon, a pretty very, very accurate weapon essentially. So a pistol perhaps, or even like a long range rifle might just have a small dot. And then the circle is your more widespread, like a shotgun or some sort of scattergun, blunderbuss type weapon, to show that if you can get a player in that circle, you're going to maybe do some damage. But yeah, various things to play with there, and obviously the crosshair script and crosshair widget are kind of the same as any other widget. So you can HTML, you can code up your own, you can code up different types of crosshair. Be interesting to see what sort of crosshairs people can put out of other games, and what sort of inspiration we can do to do some kind of interesting stuff with crosshairs. Slater B. Burn says, how could somebody change the gun that comes with the package? That's a very good idea. So I guess an AK-47 sort of assault rifle style weapon doesn't really fit the magical forest. So I imagine probably a bit more of like a crossbow probably works a little bit better. So let's have a look at changing this into a crossbow. So yeah, obviously once you've installed your stock packages, there's nothing stopping you then pulling them apart, doing whatever it is you'd like to do with them. You don't have to stick to what the stock package does, and that's kind of the beauty of the system, is that you've got that freedom to really do whatever it is you would like to do with the packages themselves, if it's just to learn from it, or if it's to actually spend some time adjusting it to fit your own sort of gameplay ideas and gameplay styles. So if we were changing this gun, what we would need to change? So first thing would be the mesh asset. So actually we don't want it to look like this, we want it to look like a different weapon. So let's search crossbow. Okay, so straight away we can see that we've changed that now into a crossbow. We don't have to worry about kind of the grip and stuff. Obviously in traditional game development, any mesh would have to be kind of rigged, and the structure and everything would have to kind of be adjusted based on the shape and size of the weapon. But the beauty of developing in Crayta, kind of getting that accessible sort of iteration and that sort of speed up, is that a lot of these things are built in a way that by having the standard grip on the player, so the grip that we specify in the inventory item spec script, which I'll get to in a moment, we know that the player is going to hold this sort of correctly. We're hoping obviously to add more grips and more variety to that over time, so as we get different weapons, we might have different grips that suit various things. I'd quite like to see this crossbow script have its own special reload animation, for example. It'd be nice to do like a proper pullback animation, that sort of thing. Okay, so next, so I mean that's kind of it for this top part of the properties. We shouldn't really have to change anything else. So what we want to do next is the gun script. So this is the kind of more complicated side of this, but again, you don't have to change anything about anything in code. You can do all of this purely from the properties. So first thing I'm thinking, okay, well this is probably going to be much slower firing, so therefore we want to probably up the damage, because if you actually score a hit, you kind of want it to be a little bit more impactful. So I'm going to go quite high. I'm going to go for like 750, and we're going to keep the range at 5,000. So again, bearing in mind 5,000 units in Crayta are centimeters, so that's 5,000 centimeters essentially. That kind of feels like the right sort of thing. We want damage fall off. So if I hit someone at point blank compared to someone who's 5,000 centimeters away, or do I want them to basically take the same amount of damage, or should the damage drop off over time, which I guess in this case it would. An arrow would lose velocity to a degree over a certain distance. So we're going to keep the damage fall off. And then you specify the max range damage. So if I was to hit someone at the absolute furthest I could, how much damage would I actually deal to them? I'm going to up this a little bit to say the 250. Okay, so I'm going to do quarter damage if I hit them from the other side of the map, but if they're close up, I'm going to do 750. So it's always going to roughly be a 2-shot kill is kind of what you're looking at. Okay, bullets per shot. So this is, imagine like a shotgun would be different. A shotgun you'd perhaps want 4, 6, 8 maybe. So you just call it kind of like a buckshot kind of spread, or again any kind of fantasy style weapon you're creating. That's how you control that. One thing to bear in mind there is the more you add there, the more ray casts you're doing every time you shoot, and the more kind of taxing it is on the server, especially if you combine that with a fast repeat time. If you've got a gun that's very fast firing, doing a lot of bullets, and that you've got 20 players on your level doing that, that's when you're going to really start to hit some performance issues. So that's one thing to bear in mind, not to go too crazy with that. I should probably just explain that a raycast is essentially how guns work in Crayta, at least in this script. There's a couple of ways that this script can handle. Actually, you can do projectiles, which work on actually firing something, and then it's up to you to kind of craft your own kind of logic and scripts around how that projectile then deals damage. How does it work? How does it fly through the air? Does it work with gravity? All that sort of stuff would be up to you at that point. But ultimately, the kind of easy way, and the way that most guns work, is via a raycast, which is essentially a line. It will draw a line from the weapon to where you're aiming and the crosshair, and then anything it hits on that line is what you shot. So that's the sort of the way it works. So we're only going to do one of those per. Got some spread. So this is actually some sort of built-in sort of inaccuracy or spread. So obviously you don't want always for your guns to really work on like a pinpoint accuracy, like kind of perfect precision system. Oh, maybe you do, but I think more often than not, you want to introduce some sort of recoil. Unless in this case you're aiming down sights. So if you're holding the secondary button or whatever it is you've sort of set up the aim down sights button to be, if you're aiming down sights, you are going to lose a lot of that sort of that spread, which is quite cool. Repeat timer. So how often can you fire? So the way to think of this is the smaller this number, the faster you're firing. So at the minute it's 0.25. So 0.25 seconds is, so it's basically, you shoot, and then your gun can do another shot 0.25 seconds later. So if you decrease that to say 0.1, you're going to get an incredibly fast firing gun. If you upped this, which I think I'll do, in fact there's not much point actually, because I'm only going to have 1 shot per clip. But let's say I had a shotgun that was sort of 4 shots per clip per ammo. I probably want that to be a little bit slower. I will probably want my gun to shoot every half a second maybe, because you imagine a shotgun would be fairly hefty. You've got to pump it perhaps, that sort of stuff. So lots of things to tweak here, but the main things you really want to tweak, especially if you're just kind of going from a weapon to like a kind of an assault rifle to a crossbow is things like the sounds and the way it feels. The shot sound, and we've actually got some nice ones built in. And the nice thing with these actually is it's not just the same sound every time. So you can pick this sound, and each time it plays, it will pick from, I think it's probably like 2 or 3 tops different sounds. It works quite nicely. So let's pick fire. The vibration effect. So what's the sort of level of vibration that the player gets when they fire this? It's a really good vibration. Is a really good good thing to include in games where possible, because it's just a really nice little bit of feedback, and it can really make guns feel pretty good when they do. Can't shoot sound. Let's have a look. I think it's dry fire, an option. There's quite a few there, but yeah, we'll go for that one. Okay, default impact effect. So this is the effect that's going to play if you shoot off something and it's kind of like ricocheted, for example. So probably don't want a muzzle flash blue, but let's just do a small orange muzzle flash. Okay, so it's kind of a weird idea, but the muzzle flashes actually work really well, because you think of a muzzle flash as like a little burst of energy, a little burst of fire, a few sparks and a bit of smoke or whatever. Actually, that's kind of the fundamentals of what a ricochet would perhaps look like. Obviously, you can make it, way more dramatic and have the big impact with, rocks flying everywhere and all that sort of stuff. But we'll stick to that one for now. Default impact sound. Probably keep that as a bullet ricochet sound. Be a bit weird. I'm not sure there's there is an impact sound for crossbows. That's pretty cool. It's a proper thunk. Okay, and the muzzle flash effect. So what effect do we want to play out the end of the weapon? So you notice you've got this big locator sort of sat here at the minute, and this is this is our muzzle location. So this is basically telling the gun script where the end of the gun is, because you think guns will come in various shapes and sizes. You want to be able to specify exactly where it is, especially if you're kind of kit bashing a gun together. It's definitely worth kind of bearing in mind that, to get that realistic kind of where the muzzle flash will come from. Okay, shots per clip. Let's go 1. And that's it. I mean, lots more to play with there, but that's kind of the main things you really want to be looking at. Okay, so friendly names. This is the name that will appear in the inventory item spec script. So again, this is another example of how these packages kind of talk to each other. You got the inventory script when it's scraping essentially what the user has in their inventory, what templates they have, i.e. the gun. It will look for the inventory item spec script and say, well, this is where the information is that I need to display. So if you're creating your own pickups and your own things that the players can collect in their games, and you want to make sure, if you're using the stock inventory script, that you want to include a inventory item spec script on that thing, and that's how you can kind of fuel all the information that will appear. So in this case, friendly name, call it crossbow. The grip, we'll leave it as a rifle grip, because we kind of want to hold it like a rifle still. You could hold it like a pistol. In fact, now I say that might be quite cool actually. Kind of hold it like the pistol. So yeah, we'll go for that. The icon. So the way that the icon works is this is expecting an asset. We look at the script. The icon asset of type asset means that essentially we need to drop an asset into here. But it is grayed out, which means you can't select, because an asset can be quite a few different things. That drop down would be kind of massive. So the way you update that is go to the library, find the thing you want to add, and then simply drag and drop that in, and you'll see that now says crossbow. Assets that you could drop in there could also be voxels. So let's say you've got a game where you're collecting neon cubes. It might be that you want to have a template that you collect in the inventory and actually have equipable and displayable, which is the you can include the neon voxel icon asset into that. Pickup spawner script. So just like before when we used the when we did it for the health pickup, we've got the same script here. So again, this is kind of one of those scripts that you'll see a lot through the stock packages, which is a really good way to control our weapons and how things can be collected. And then our iron site item script. So we're going to keep, maybe we'll drop this to be a dot instead, because again, thinking of an arrow is going to be a very specific little kind of, it's going to be, not much spread, it's going to be a very precise weapon. And then the final thing on this template is pickup trigger. So this doesn't actually come into effect in this game we're making here, because the players get given the guns and then they get taken away at the end of the round. But if this was a pickup that's in the game, it's always good to have weapons and things collected on a trigger rather than specifically interacting with the weapon itself, especially if it's quite a small, fine mesh. So you want to have the trigger basically placed nice and big around the area, and then interacting with the trigger. So here we can see on interact or on trigger enter. So there's two ways in which to collect this, so interaction or collision. And that's essentially just reaching up to the pickup spawner script on the gun template itself and firing that pickup logic. So again, the way that's set up, there's no code involved. It's just using the events to sort of bind that sort of stuff in. Sinjin says, I've tried the target practice example using orbit cam. Would using projectile weapon using Andy's projectile tutorial be better than hit scan? I think that's a tricky one, and you could use either, I think is the answer to that. The orbit cam is different. So the way the action cam works, I think I was wrong when I said about the raycast before, actually. I said it comes from the gun. The raycast actually comes from the camera. So it's from the camera to the crosshair, if you drew a line basically through the center of your screen. That's the way that the raycasts work. So if you pivot to an orbit camera, when you've got this camera that can freely move around the player, the way the default guns work is they're still doing that same raycast. So you're essentially shooting right at the player. So it probably wouldn't take a huge amount of work. Maybe that's something I could explore in one of the casual sort of streams to do on a Monday or a Thursday, but essentially getting the raycast to come from the gun itself forwards of where the player is looking. So essentially spinning and kind of changing where that raycast comes from. So it's whatever the player's looking at is actually what you're shooting at. That might be quite interesting. You can create some pretty cool sort of games and top-down kind of perspective style things like that. Or projectiles would work the same, but again, you'd have to make sure that the projectile comes from the player and the direction they're facing, and not any of the basic logic that basically does the raycast from the camera, because orbit camera is entirely different to the way the action camera works. Slater B. Burns says, is it possible to change the volume of the gun sounds without adding any logic? That's a good point. I'm not sure it is, because what let me have a quick look at the code. Because essentially, I assume we're just using the play sound. Yeah, I don't think play sound offers any volume options. You can have a fade in and a fade out, but there's no volume options. The only way you could do that, and I'm not sure how well this would work, or if it would even work, would be to have a sound entity on the player, or even a sound entity on the gun that you activate. Because then once you've got the sound entity and you get the properties that you can tweak. But I don't think, I'm not sure how well that would work. So yeah, that's probably one thing to experiment with and play with, is having an entity that you play. But yeah, I'm not sure that's a really a viable or particularly easy thing. Anna Mind Game says hello from Brazil, so hello, nice to have you here. Do make sure you follow, subscribe, and maybe go ahead and join our Discord. A really great place to keep up with everybody. So if you're here, say welcome and nice to have you on board. Thanks for us watched too much Diablo 2 recently. Yeah, I've been watching a lot of top-down stuff and playing a lot of Outriders as well. So I've got this whole like looter shooter idea in my head, and I'm thinking, yeah, top-down one would be pretty cool. So I'll maybe explore the way that works. That is, as I say, one thing to bear in mind, especially with these stock packages, is it is one way of doing things. There's always different ways to accomplish everything, and the nature of the stock packages allows you to have a starting point in which you can kind of learn from, and you can tweak and pull apart and do various things with. So, right. So where are we up to? We finish our crosshair? I think we did. Yes, we've got a crossbow, and that should all be set up, ready without any more change.
I've just been doing something a little bit naughty in the environment. So I'm starting to add more trees to the forest. I'm using the oak tree mesh, but I noticed that the overhanging branches have quite low collision on them, and so sort of as you run underneath it, it's going to disable your jumps. So I've taken the collision off the tree and added a big invisible, well, it's not invisible yet, but it will be, just a column in the middle. So if you fly over to tree oak one,
no, I'm here. I'm just I'm waiting for the explanation of the cheese tree.
Yeah, so I always make my invisible collision out of cheese because I know that if I see cheese, I've got to set the invisible flag on it.
That's a good point.
Because I know it's probably wrong. I make it out of something a bit weird, and then I can just go, that's not supposed to be visible, so I can hit the invisible flag on that. And now I'll make the tree into a template, and every tree that I place will have that collision built in, and you will be able to hit the things as you jump around it.
Nice, cool. And I guess you say that's a naughty thing to do because it's extra entities.
Yeah, it's doubling the entity count around the tree, and also probably if there are any of our artists watching, they'll be like,
I'm not sure there's any threat of that. But yeah, and I think it's definitely valid, and it's the sort of thing that, depending on the game, depending on the what you're going for, it can really make a big difference. If you want a really dense forest, you kind of don't want players to constantly be getting stuck on little trees and branches and stuff. But obviously, you don't also want players to be able to hide in the middle of the tree. So I think that's a perfectly viable option. It's just one thing to definitely bear in mind is the added increased entities, where they're not necessarily needed unless you deem them to be. But this size of map, I think would be okay. What we're at performance-wise, we're at 180 entities, which is 4% of our budget. So I think you can afford a few cheese oaks. Cool. Right. So there was one more package that I wanted to sort of explore, which is a really handy one, and I've seen a few people playing with this a little bit more in Discord recently, and I'm actually quite pleased people are picking it up because it's a very powerful package that I think can do a lot in terms of explaining how games work and how games come together. And it's the prompts package. So the prompts are what you see on screen. It's the standard on-screen prompts for controls and what you can interact with and use in your inventory. So it's basically a really nice, dynamic and flexible way to explain to players how to play the game, almost like what they can interact with, what certain contextual things will do. So let's install this. It's also pretty good to see there's quite a few people making their own versions. I know TMZOS, who's working on Crayta Dine Intercept, which is a pretty cool game, has been in Discord asking about various ways to adjust it and to kind of make it fit a little bit better. And we were saying, about doing it interact in the middle of the screen and things like that. So again, it's a really good example of taking what was there and kind of building their own version. Okay, so if I go back here, so let's have a look at what we got here. So not the game, prompts. Okay, so again, we're installing this on the user, so we might want prompts to be kind of on the user specifically. This also comes with a player prompts override, so this is a second script folder that isn't essential. You don't need to install the second one on the player, but it's just a way that you could have the player determine kind of their own prompts. But let's just do the user prompts view for now. And we see that we get a couple of examples here. So press A to jump or press B to do something else with a really long description, which I guess is just a way to test that bit of UI. There's a few things that you can do here. There's all the different instructions. So what you would type here is any instruction bound to those keys that is a permanent thing. So if you can always jump, or you can always crouch, let's say, you would specify in here. So the primary instruction, whenever a player presses primary, if it always says the same thing, you'd type it in here. But actually, that's not always the case. And a game, games will quite often be very contextual. So depending on, primary could do nothing. It could do firing a gun. It could do wiping a card. It could do swinging a sword. There's a lot of different things it could do. So actually we need things to tell the prompts package or the prompt script, actually, given the circumstances the player is in right now, this is what is going to happen. And the way we do that, and again, this is an example of how the stock packages are already kind of set up to communicate with each other. If I open the gun script, okay, and we need to look for a function in here called get button prompts. Okay, so it's a very, very small function. It's a little bit of a complex one. But what it's doing is relatively straightforward. So let's just hide all that and let's have a look. So the way this works is it leans on a system in Lua, which is actually a really handy little trick to learn, especially if you're in the kind of the Lua coding side of things. Is it creates a prompts table here, so we have our prompt, okay, and then we're essentially doing a center scripts on the user, okay, to say get the button prompts. And then if we have a player, we do the same. We center scripts. And then again, if we have an inventory, we basically, whatever they're holding, we send it scripts on that. Now, normally center scripts would be almost like a fire and forget function. So you would, the way that code works, it executes line by line. And normally it would get to here. It would say if they've got the inventory, then, let's do this. So, okay, we've got an inventory, let's do this. And then it would just move on. But because we're passing a table to that, actually the game and the code is going to wait for that function to finish executing. So it's a little bit complicated, but yeah, normally when you say send scripts, you say send scripts and then you just move on. But if you pass a table to it, it actually will wait for that table to get populated. So we're passing in this table of prompts. And then what we need to essentially do is in the thing we're holding, if that has a get button prompt script. So here we're saying on whatever's held. So again, we've got our inventory view script, which we set up earlier. The held entity call get button prompts, which is going to land in this function here. So this allows us to basically have the thing we're holding be contextual, or give contextual prompts based on what they're holding and what the current state of this thing is. So in this case, we want to have prompts.primary. So the primary prompt will be a message. And this looks a little bit complicated again, but let's just break that down. So if we look at our gun, we'll notice that in the gun script, we have the fire message property on the right-hand side there. And it says fire, those in shoot, to pull the trigger, essentially fire, name, and name being in the curly braces. So the curly braces basically say, okay, well, we're going to replace this with something because the name of the gun could be very different. We want the prompts to appear contextual to what we're doing. So it could be fire gun, fire crossbow, fire, rail gun, fire, whatever it is we want. The way it does that is it essentially gets that fire message and it calls format and then passes in the name. And that name again comes from the inventory item spec script, which we said before. So we said the friendly name for this is the crossbow. So our prompt will be fire crossbow. Okay, so the next step we get actually here is how we can make these prompts be contextual. So the next one is the extra one action. So prompt.extra1 is going to be our reload message. But think about it here, actually, we don't need that reload message to always be there, because if the player's got a full clip, if they don't need to reload, then actually we shouldn't show that prompt. This get button prompts function, or I should say this update function, is called every frame. By every frame, I mean it's getting called 30 or 60 times a second. It's getting called very, very quick. I assume it's going to kick us back to the hub or kick back in. Are you still there, Ed?
I am, but that was probably my fault. I jumped into a solo server just to check something.
Oh, okay, that's fine. These things happen.
It's come back fine for me.
Yeah, I think I'm probably just going to island it back in there in a second.
No, there it goes.
Unknown error.
I spoke too soon.
Fun and games. We almost made it through the whole stream without crashing. At least it wasn't instantly like last time we streamed.
My bad. That's my fault.
That's okay. That's just the way it goes. So I think, there's only really one more bit of the prompts package I want to explain, which is around the interaction, which is quite a powerful way that the prompts work. And I think we're kind of at the end of the stream, and hopefully that's been a useful thing. Let me just invite you back into a group, Ed.
The edge of the world has no collision on it. I haven't figured out what to do about that, so people can't fall off the world.
Okay, have an invite.
Cool.
Okay, let's go back in there. Cool. So yeah, as I say, if that's been useful as a breakdown, then it'd be great if you could let me know in chat, or let me know in the comments if you're watching this on demand after the stream. But yeah, it's been interesting. It's quite good for me, I think, to reinforce a lot of this stuff and kind of really go over it and get my head around it. But
do you want to try dropping in and shooting some crossbows at each other?
Yeah, let's do that. We should get our textual prompts as well, which is nice. So okay, we don't have a player, which is fine. That's to be expected. We can see we've got our spinny health pickups.
Both starting at the same location.
Yeah, I should set those up. Oh, the pistol
grip on the crossbow looks pretty cool.
It looks great, doesn't it? Ragdoll. Cool. Works nicely. Can I pick up health? I can pick up health. Ooh, nice butterflies. They look great.
Again, part of the template of the lights that are spinning around in the pools.
Ooh.
Every pool should have butterflies as well.
Oh yeah, a nice reflection. Oh, that's cool. Very magical.
Yeah.
Nice.
Cool.
Okay, cool. Let's go back. Right, so what was I up to? Okay, the prompts script. So we can get the prompts from the user, get the prompts from the player, get the prompts from the thing they're holding. But actually, it's also good to get the prompts of something that the player is looking at. So the way that works is we have another slightly different function call, but it's called get interact prompt. So the way that works is we every frame again, so it's kind of very quick, very it's constantly happening. We have this get interaction option. So get interaction is a API that we can call on a character, and it essentially tells us what is the player looking at. If they were to hit the interact button now, what would they interact with? So we get that, and if something is returned, we send to the script on that thing, and we call get interact prompt. Okay, so what we'd need to do, and this would require a little bit of code, would be to essentially, let's say on this door, we could add a script, and it would be just like the way the gun script is. So if I just go back to that function, button prompts. So we would go to the we would add a script to the thing. So let's say it's a button or it's a lever. We would add a function called get interact prompt. That would take the prompts as well. And then inside that function, you could specify, a lot of different things. You could have some context, if this, then that. If it's locked, then the interaction prompt could just say this is locked, or if it's not locked, it could say, press E to open. And it would just be the same. You say prompts.interact, passed in a text, which could be formatted in whatever way you'd like. So that's a really good way if you're creating a game that requires players to interact with things, to pick stuff up, but also apply some context to it, as I say. So perhaps interaction with a button on a door, the door is locked. The prompt could actually come up on the screen and say door is locked. So it's a pretty powerful system that does work quite easily, quite straightforward. It's a simple sort of drag and drop type thing. Yeah, I think that kind of covers most of really what I wanted to do. Let's just have a quick look to see what else is appearing here. So
if you can see anything through the trees.
Mm-hmm.
One last thing, just as we're playing then, I mentioned the spinning lights in the pools. They were done drag and drop as well. I just used the move and rotate script dragged from the community panel. Just plot them on, so that just works straight out of the box as well.
Nice. Yeah. It's really nice to have that sort of level of, things that just work. Yeah, it's pretty cool. But there's a few different packages here to explore. Perhaps we could do this sort of stream again. We'd explore the other side of starter games. That might be a good way to do this. So we could have a look at things like the shop. The action pass is a pretty good one. I think that's a little bit obsolete since we added events. Then we've got things like the way that it saves and the way that kind of inventories could be saved and loaded and auto saved, and perhaps we could have a look at doing like an adventure game style by just making stock packages. Yeah, I think that kind of wraps this up. I hadn't really ever planned to make this into a full game, but maybe we could take this environment and do something nice with Ed, to have not wasted too much time essentially. But I think we're going to wrap that up here. So thank you for joining in, Ed. So that's been pretty fun.
No problem. That was fun. Yeah.
Pretty nice environment out of this to go ahead and do some fun stuff with. So cool. All right. Cool. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Okay, cool. All right, well, thank you everybody for joining in. As I say, that's been a pretty quick blitz through a bunch of the stock packages, but hopefully it's been a quite good insight into how these sort of games come together. So a lot of times people will make a stock sort of a starter game, and hopefully it'll encourage you to go and take the starter games now and start to pull it apart and see a little bit about how it comes together, and that'll only expand your own learning about how games can be made in Crayta. And again, the beauty of it is there's really just one way of doing it. There's always a different way, lots of different approaches to kind of creating these various games. Thank you for everyone joining in. It's been pretty fun. Nice little bit of chat going. That's pretty good. And if you haven't already, do make sure you head over and join our Discord. So it looks like Streamlabs just threw a link in for me, which is great. And that's discord.gg/Crayta. That's a really good place to keep up, obviously, with all the community. And as devs, we do a lot of sort of chatting back and forth and various stuff, off-topic things. We've got help channels. We've got kind of sneak peeks, game updates, game releases. Lots of ways for you to promote your own game. A really good way of kind of engaging with the creator community. You can also find us on Twitter and Instagram at Crayta Game on both of those platforms. So really good places to keep up with all the latest news. And obviously we're also kind of stream 4 times a week at the moment. So that's on YouTube and Twitch. So you could follow us there and also subscribe to us on YouTube. That'd be great. We'll be back tomorrow with another stream. So AJ's coming back with Selena, and they'll be playing some more games. They've got a pretty good lineup ready. We've got some old games. Some really old games actually, so games that were in Crayta a long time ago, which is quite exciting. Kind of bring those ones back up, as well as some new ones. So do make sure you join in tomorrow at the same time. So that'll be 7 p.m. BST, which is GMT +1, on Twitch and YouTube. And then we've also got a really cool tutorial coming out later this week, actually, Andy's tutorial. So do make sure you keep an eye out for that. That'll be dropping on Thursday at 5 p.m. So yeah, keep an eye out for that, because I think that package, I'm not sure if we've announced what it is, but yeah, that tutorial is going to be a really good one for players to create some pretty cool games with. So yeah, thank you everybody. Do let us know if you found this useful in the comments or in chat now, and I'll we'll see about doing this again in the future. In the meantime, have a good week everybody, and we'll see you tomorrow.